Okay, so hi everyone. Well, more people will be coming in, but I want to be mindful of time here, so we'll get started. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us on a special Tuesday offering of the seminar. So did I spell that right? So yes, we're on to our seminar on sales and marketing. I think we called it Sales and Marketing 101, but I believe I saw the title of Peter and Rochelle's slides and they changed it to Sales and Go-to-Market, which is, they're kind of the same thing, semantics. But we're super lucky to have Peter de Verteuil and Rochelle Grayson with us today. So they are actually our mentors for our Discovery Foundation Sales Acceleration Program, which works with in-revenue companies to help build their sales processes and sales in general. So they're working with companies, a bunch of companies, and meeting with them every week right now in one cohort. So I'm very grateful that they carved out some extra time to have this topic with you, because I know how busy they are. So thank you, Rochelle and Peter. Okay, so here we are in our seminar series. We're about halfway through. So today again, sales and marketing, and we'll keep on going every week. So most of the topics are on Wednesdays, but so there are going to be some weeks coming up. We have 2 in a week and other things. So please take a look at the events on our webpage. And again, you are welcome to attend one or many, all of them. Invite a friend, whatever you like. So please keep on joining us. So New Ventures BCC, I kind of have already said, but we're a nonprofit organization. We are here to work with BC tech startups. Many of you, of course, are here for the competition. And I know many of you have a round 2 submission due this week too. We also have our year-round accelerator program, and of course the sales accelerator, which I have mentioned. So hearing Rochelle and Peter today will be a great teaser for you to get an idea of who they are and the types of things that they are fantastic at. So, if this program or this topic in particular speaks to you, definitely check out that program. And we're taking applications for our June cohort now. Some community events coming up. These are just friends, partner organizations that have some interesting things coming up. I'll highlight May 17th. So the Vancouver Entrepreneurs Forum, they're having a blockchain event. And if you are a blockchain startup and you want to do a 100-second lightning pitch, we are looking for companies to pitch still. So if that's of interest, feel free to message me and we can send you the link to the application form. Okay, and I think I've mentioned this before as well, but the video and the slides for all our events are available on our website. If you go to our website, newventuresbc.com, click on seminars, you'll go to the page that has all the videos and all the links to the slides. So the slides for this event will be up later today. Okay, I'm going to thank our sponsors who let us do all these events and make this all happen. So title sponsor is Innovate BC. Our gold sponsors, EY, Fasken, SFU Beauty School of Business, and the UBC Soder School of Business. Silver sponsors are Acetech, TELUS Ventures, Output, Vantech, and Volition. And many bronze and media sponsors listed here, who are a lot of supporting organizations for startups. So please do check all of these organizations and media outlets as well. And that's it. Want to get in touch? This is how, or just send me a message in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing here so Rochelle can start. So Rochelle is going to take you through the first half of the presentation today, and then Peter will take over from there. And feel free to put your questions in the chat for questions during, and we'll also try and have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A as well. So stay tuned for that. All right, over to you, Rochelle. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Angie. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rochelle Grayson, and as Angie mentioned, Peter and I both are involved in the Sales Accelerator program. And today you're going to get a little bit of a sort of an abridged or a shortened version of some fundamentals that we like to share, specifically around for also startups that are starting to enter the market or get started, but also those that have been in the market as well. So we're hopefully going to address a lot of different things. We only have 90 minutes. So please understand that we're only going to scratch the surface. We'll do the best we can And as Angie mentioned, if you have any questions while I'm presenting, please feel free to put them in the chat. And here's what we're going to cover. So I'm going to kick it off with lead generation. What we find often is that there are usually two big areas that many startups struggle with. And often people focus on the sales piece, but then they recognize that actually building their pipeline is perhaps an even larger issue. So we're going to kick it off with how do you generate leads? And I also want to talk about this from a perspective of someone starting fresh, because you can start generating leads long before your product is done, is completed. So don't wait until your product is done to start generating leads. You might want to think about some of these things even before then. Then we're going to move on to types of sales and go-to-market models. Peter's going to talk a bit about that, as well as different sales functions and roles. Not every business is the same. And so what you really want to do is you want to understand what is the appropriate sales function for your particular business. Finally, what are some of the key elements of the sales process? We're going to review some stuff, and hopefully we have enough time to go through some of the key areas that you want to consider when you're in that sales process. And then we have some additional tips. And finally, some time for Q&A at the end. We do want to make sure we have time at the end in case something comes up. So without further ado, let's get started. And let's talk first about a lead generation framework. And Angie, just a quick thing, will they be able to get copies of these slides afterwards?
Yeah, we'll make a PDF available.
Okay, so you'll get copies of the slides as well. I just wanted to highlight that because I know some people might be wondering, and so I thought I'd ask that question in advance. So the lead generation framework that we're going to talk about starts with the first thing is defining your target audience. And one of the things that you will hear in marketing, if you hear it once, you will hear it 1,000 times, who's your audience? It's probably the most common question everyone asks in marketing. And I'm going to go into each one of these areas in more detail. So this is just sort of all of the steps, and then we're going to dive into them a little bit deeper. The next step is really setting your goals and objectives. What is it you actually want your leads to do? What is it you want people to, what are those calls to action? How are you going to make sure that you are actually getting as many sales leads as you want to and qualified leads? So really identifying your goals and objectives. We're content development. I know this is where a lot of people focus specifically on marketing, and we'll scratch the surface with a little bit about content marketing, although that's a whole perhaps webinar in and of itself. And we'll talk a little bit about lead magnets and what those are and give you some ideas for things to think about. Finally, we then are going to talk about nurturing and closing those leads. And Peter's going to go into much more detail around what that entails and how do you basically, once you have leads, how do you close them? How do you nurture them? How do you make sure you have a solution for them? And then finally, as part of this whole lead generation framework, you want to make sure you get customer referrals. So one of the best ways to get more customers is to ask your existing customers to refer others like themselves. So we're going to briefly talk a bit about that and give you some ideas around ways to get some of these customer referrals, because those are probably the warmest leads. People also will listen to other customers or other peers, colleagues, way more than they listen to you. So don't miss out on that last step. And then, as I like to say, rinse, repeat. You want to start going back and reviewing, are the customers the same as your target audience? And do you need to update that or anything along those lines? So first thing is defining your target audience. And the first part that you want to do here is really market segmentation. And this is really important. And a lot of people will start with their total addressable markets and service addressable markets, which is great. But from a marketing perspective, often that is not detailed enough to really understand who you want to speak with, who do you want to connect with. And so in this, I really have highlighted a couple of more areas that you might want to think about. And that's really things like what industry or industries, plural, are you going after? Are there any geographic locations? Is it lower mainland? Is it BC? Is it Canada? Is it North America? Who are you targeting? And then organization size. One of the things that a lot of people forget about when they're looking at their market segmentation is what's the size of the organization that you are targeting? Who's your ideal customer? And this can include anything like the revenues or their net profits, but it could also be the number of employees. How many employees do they have, or how many employees do they have in a specific department or team? So that's something when you're looking at your target audience, that's really critical, because a company with a department of 20 people versus a solopreneur is very, very different in terms of how you market to them and how you sell them your solutions. It might be number of transactions as well. So how many transactions do they have? How frequently will they use your service? Is this something that they do on a monthly basis? Is this something that they do once a quarter, once a year? So how often will they engage with your solution ideally, right? And also, what is the value of any of those transactions? Are they looking for a solution that is tens of thousands of dollars or less than hundreds of dollars? So you want to think about, again, what is the range of your audience that they would find reasonable? And finally, what is their usage? Is it heavy, medium, or light? Whatever it is you're selling, your technology, your solution, your service, are they going to use it a lot? Are they going to use it sort of in a medium, or is it going to be a light usage? That really impacts, in a lot of cases, how it becomes a habit or not, right? So you want to keep that in mind. Also, are there any complementary products or services? This often relates to integrations. Are there other technologies that are similar or complement what you are offering? So you might say, my target audience are people who already are using QuickBooks, for example. You may not be selling an accounting software package, but that really highlights other services that people might be using, and that helps you understand who else might be interested. And finally, how long have they been in business? Are they themselves startups? Have they been in the industry for many years? Things along those lines. So these are all sort of things around market segmentation, your target audience, that you want to think about when it comes to the organization. And what size of organizations, and it might be plural, you might have two different groups that you're looking at, are you really targeting? And you will often find that you will have a primary target market. So these are like the ones you're going after first, but you may also find that there's a secondary market. Some very common examples might be a primary target market might be small and medium-sized businesses, but a secondary target market might be larger enterprises, or vice versa. So that's something to keep in mind. What are your primary target market? What's your primary target market? And what are your secondary ones? Then this gives you a great sense of the organizations you're going after. But again, who specifically are you targeting? And here we want to talk about customer personas. You may have heard this term before, but it really is a semi-fictional representation traits of the customer. In other words, the person you are going to deal with, right? Who is that person? And ideally, you want these to be built from data and customer research, customer validation, in things that you've had. So here, this usually includes a fictitious name and photo so people can understand roughly who that is, position, title, job experience. These would be things of literally the person you're going after. I'm going after the customer support manager. I'm going after the VP of something. So who is it that you are really targeting within the organizations that we've just defined? What is their personality type? And here we really, are they introvert? Are they extrovert? Are they right brain? Are they left brain? Are they creative? Are they more analytical and technical? Do they tend to be optimistic, or are they very pessimistic and conservative? Depending on sort of the personality types, you also want to sort of deal with your sales pitch, which Peter will talk about later, and tailor it to the kind of audience that they are. You don't want to give them something with lots of numbers if you know that they're a lot more creative and big picture or strategy oriented, or vice versa. What are their online behaviors? In other words, where do they go to get information? Is it through LinkedIn? Are they on Twitter? Are they on TikTok? Are they on Instagram? Where are they active? Where do they read? What media sites are they looking at, right? What are those things? Where do they go to get information about purchases? Really important, what are their pain points and challenges? What's the problem you are trying to solve? If you aren't solving a problem, it's a nice to have, not a must have. So really understanding your pain points and challenges is clear. What are their goals? Not the goals that you have. What are their goals, or what are they trying to achieve? And then finally, what might be some objections that they have? And we often talk about build or buy. So are they going to build something like their solution, or are they going to buy it? That usually is big for entrepreneurs. Are they going to say, oh, I don't have money right now? Are they going to say, I'm not available right now? Are they going to say, oh, it's my boss's issue? You want to start thinking about those ahead of time so you can start preparing ways to address those issues when they come up. Okay. So, basically, I've given you here a couple of example ones. This is a sort of a very typical business to consumer, B2C persona. This is for someone, Sarah, who's a student, and this was a coffee shop marketing persona. I really like this one because not only does it talk about her age and demographics, but it also talks about her online behaviors. Facebook is her lifeline. It talks about what she's looking for, what influences her, if she has any brand affinities. So what other brands does she find in her life? Hopes, dreams, worries, fears. So I find this is a really good starting point to show you what a much more wholesome, fulsome customer persona can look like, right? And probably for many of us, you might look at this and go, oh yeah, I know someone like this. It might be our kids, it might be someone else. And so this really gives you a very clear sense of what you're doing. Then the next thing that I want to highlight is a B2B, because for those of you who are in the B2B space, there's lots of stuff around B2C customer personas. And I want to give you an example of a B2B one of someone, this is in a hospital, director of critical care. And here we've sort of structured it a little bit differently around demographic, their values and goals, what are the experiences they want, their level of seniority. So that's something that we should keep in mind when you're doing things in that way. So again, what are the problems specific often to her organization? And what are some of the main points where she's getting information? Now, Zach, you asked a question, are there any particular differences for B2C target audience setting we should be aware of? Hopefully, one of the things for business to consumers that you really want to think about are what are the triggers? What are the price points? Maybe. So again, there are different price points that they might be making decisions on for a B2C thing. Also, who influences their decisions? Often, getting into their sort of circle of friends is as much, like getting their friends to recommend things is way more important than you as an organization. So how can you get and permeate into those things? So yeah, okay, I seem to be freezing for a bit, so I hope that these things don't happen going forward, but I will continue on, and hopefully that answers your question, Zach. Thank you for the great question. And these are just some good examples, I think, of some of the differences that you might see between a B2C and a B2B customer persona. Again, you will get these examples in your handouts later. So then you want to set your goals and objectives. So what do you want your leads to do? Often we want them to purchase, we want them to donate, maybe, and those are pretty much your primary conversions. But then there's secondary ones. Maybe if they don't do that, you want to sign up, provide contact information. You want to do something else, and that could be a trial, a webinar, a demo, a newsletter, downloadable content. These are all secondary things that hopefully will eventually get them to actually buy. So think about how, if they don't buy, how can you still engage with them and do something as a backup? And then finally, with these goals and objectives, set specific KPIs and targets. You want to make sure that you know exactly what those KPIs and targets are. So make sure you have those all set up appropriately. Then we have something called lead magnets. And this is something that often people forget about or don't think about until a little bit later. A lead magnet is something that you may give away for free or for contact details. So we've all been somewhere where they said, you can have this ebook, just give us your email address. That would be considered a lead magnet. And there are lots of different kinds of lead magnets. There are educational ones that educate your target audience on something maybe about your industry, not necessarily just about your product, but even broader. Teach them something that they don't already know. Then there are what we call useful lead magnets. This could be a tutorial. This could be a calculator, something else that helps them do something, achieve a small task. So that's something that you might want to consider as well. There might be some community building lead magnets. So these are create a way for your audience to build a community to connect with others that they have in common. So we often see these with those direct challenges or group forums. So it's a great way for them to connect with others who are experiencing things like themselves. Entertaining will be entertainment, quizzes, fun things, which Harry Potter character are you? But it could be something, just any kind of quiz about themselves. And then there are what we call bottom of the funnel lead magnets, which push a lead to a customer. And these are things like free trial, discount codes, a free consultation, things along those lines. So you can start doing some of these even before your product is complete. So start engaging with your audience well before you have a finished product, so that when your product is done, you already have someone to engage with and send your communications to. Finally, nurture and close your leads. Peter's going to go into more detail around these, so I won't go. I'll give you some high-level ideas. First of all, you want to have different content depending on where they are. So tailor your content to your person when you're trying to nurture them. If you do some research on their organization, check out their LinkedIn profiles, stalk them, and find out exactly what they're interested in and try to give them information that's helpful to them. You may want to also interact with them on multiple channels. So don't just do email, also connect with them on LinkedIn. Maybe you connect with them on Twitter. Maybe you offer a webinar. So lots of different options to connect with this group, right? Don't just try to do everything with one channel. Figure out where they are and meet them there. Again, multiple touch points. Talk to them across a variety of different things. So again, increase your interactions. Don't make it just one way and only one time. Most people need to be exposed to your message multiple times before they actually think about it and before it really resonates and they act on it. Big one on sales, follow up. Most people don't follow up. So following up is huge. Those that do often will see better results. So make sure you follow up in a timely manner to engage with them and make sure that they're interested and keep your brand top of mind. Oops. Then personalized communications. So if you can personalize the emails when possible, try to find information, tidbits, groups that they're part of, so you can get a better sense of what really their hot buttons are. Do some lead scoring. After you have quite a few leads, try to understand which ones are of higher value to you than others. And this really helps you decide which ones to focus on. At first, you may not know, but over time, you may understand which ones are going to convert better. So you might be able to score and say, this one looks like a 5, this looks like a 3, and this looks like a 1, right? And so you can also then split up your time in terms of how much time you spend with these leads based on what you think the likelihood of conversion will be. And then make sure that sales and marketing, so that's why Peter and I are doing this together, are in alignment, that we are actually aligned, that when I bring in the leads, I'm bringing in the right kinds of leads that sales actually wants and can then convert. So there has to be a seamless handover around a lot of these things. So make sure that there's alignment there, because right now the lines are very blurred between marketing and sales. And then the final thing that I want to highlight is key referrals. Ask for the referral. Most people don't ask for referrals. And there are lots of ways that you can ask for referrals. If you have customers, ask them to just tell their friends. They could do an online review, or maybe they do a testimonial. You ask them for a testimonial about their experience. And when you do that, ask them for the results, not just that they like your product, but how has it actually helped them and benefited them? So you have some very specific results that you can share. Social recommendations. So again, maybe if it's a B2C, it's about making it easy for them to share, oh, I bought this really cool thing, to their friends and to their network. So make it easy for them to do that. Email referrals is another one, and incentive-based referrals. And I put this as 5 because some people think, oh, I will do an affiliate program, 5%, that will get people to do referrals. But not all people want money. Sometimes they want to just be highlighted. Sometimes they just want recognition. So make sure before you do incentive-based referrals that actually is something that will motivate your customers and motivate your target audience. Because if it doesn't, it actually can make that relationship feel very transactional and actually degrade how people view your organization. So I'm not saying don't do it, but make sure that it's the right approach for your audience. So with that, I haven't seen any other questions in the chat. So I'm just going to do a quick thing. Here again is the lead generation framework. So these are sort of the steps: define your audience, set your goals, develop content, and hopefully some lead magnets, nurture, close those leads, and get customer referrals. In terms of next steps, I'm just putting them here again. Identify your primary markets, maybe secondary, and develop detailed customer personas. Those will really help you when you then are doing your marketing and understanding what words to use, what will really attract the people, because we sometimes forget. And so doing this upfront will really help you. And then we have set your lead goals, objectives, and targets. So do that. Make sure you do have KPIs and targets so you know if you're on track. Often you'll kind of do that very loosey-goosey, but we find it works better to have that specifically. Think about the types of lead magnets you want to offer for your target audiences. You don't have to do all of those. Maybe pick one or two, start with, and then go for anything around those things. Review lead nurturing and closing strategy. And so Peter's going to talk more about that. And then develop or improve your customer referral programs, which makes the question, Elizabeth, you're asking, can you recommend any platforms or software to use or to share experiences? And this is a really tough one because I do find that a lot depends on the platforms that you're using. So one of the things that I've found is there are tools that can allow people to do very quick social media sharing, but you probably want to customize a message for the particular platform. Sharing a message on Facebook is different than sharing one on Instagram, which has lots of hashtags. So you want to sort of customize it and make sure that you have something that works well. And so I'm hesitant to just have like a silver bullet of software that does it and just, sort of spams different platforms. I think you are better off finding things that are perhaps a lot more specific and organic. Should you, and Paul, you're asking, should you ask for referral up front or at least let them know you'll be asking for them? I think, Paul, you can always ask. I mean, a referral can be just part of a casual conversation, like, hey, if you really like what we're doing, we'd love for you to tell your friends, right? It doesn't have to be something formal like, can you do referrals? But it can be like, try it, see what happens. But if it happens, we'd love to have you tell your friends. If you were going to do a testimonial, yes, that might be helpful to say, if you're really happy, we'd love to speak to you later on and have a testimonial and use that maybe in your marketing materials on your website and things like that. That might be a really good thing to just let them know you might be asking for that going forward. And Elizabeth, you're saying, or once to integrate with CRMs. So, obviously a lot of CRMs or a lot of the startups that we work with use HubSpot within their CRMs. So, on the email side, we see a lot of people who are using MailChimp. Literally on a lot of the, share this message with your networks. A lot of people are doing that organically because they want to sort of make sure that the message makes sense. So again, I know there's a lot around marketing automation and let's automate everything. The problem with marketing automation is it can come across as very bland, very generic, and people very quickly, even if you start seeing the same message everywhere, that actually reflects kind of poorly on your brand. So what you want to do is sort of try to have messages or maybe multiple messages that allow people to do things in a way that's very organic. But what I'll do is, Elizabeth, maybe I can follow up with Angie, and I don't want to cut off my time with Peter. I've already gone a little bit over, so I want to make sure that he has time to give you his sales tips and tricks. But I will keep this, and maybe I can send some links with the handouts and things like that. Okay. So there you go. There you have it. I've also provided some additional resources around what is a lead magnet. Here we go. Some nurturing software tools for any marketing team. So there are some. A lot of them are roughly around HubSpot. So there's a list there. And then also 10 best referral program ideas for every part of your campaign, because I thought those were areas that you might. And so there are links here as well as that you can look into. Okay. Now I'm going to hand it over to Peter and let him take the reins. Thank you everyone for your patience, and I hope you've gotten a nugget or two from that. I will stop sharing and let Peter take the reins.
Thanks, Rochelle. So while Peter's sharing, I'm going to put a link to a YouTube playlist on New Ventures BC's YouTube, clearly. And in there is the playlist for sales and marketing accelerator webinars that Rochelle and Peter ran last year. And there's a much deeper dive into some of these topics within those. And at the back of most of Rochelle's presentations, she has a very long list of links and resources and platforms and things like that. So definitely check all those out. Okay, over to you, Peter. Thank you, Rochelle.
Okay, great. You can hear me okay and see my slides?
Yeah, looks good.
Terrific. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Rochelle. And I really recommend everyone do take a look at those YouTube videos that Angie mentioned. It's a great resource, and Rochelle's got a series that go into a lot of different topics. So highly recommend them. So again, just to cover the agenda, Rochelle's talked about lead generation. So I'm going to go a little bit more into kind of types of sales and go-to-market models. I'm going to talk very kind of high level about sales functions and roles. And I'm going to drill a little bit into kind of the actual sales process, mainly focused on kind of what I call high touch sales. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. But actually kind of what are some of the key elements of that sales process when you're actually engaging with the customer. And then just a few other additional tips and tricks on sales. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A. So one thing people ask a lot is when I use the term go-to-market quite a bit, what does that really mean? Is that just another word for sales? And it includes sales and it includes marketing. And one thing Rochelle talked about is how, aligned, how important it is to get alignment between sales and marketing. But go-to-market models can also include stuff like, how do you position your product, vis-a-vis your competitor? Are you positioning it as more of a premium product versus, for instance, just like a low price commodity type product? It can also include how you package your product or solution and also how you price it. So go-to-market is really kind of all elements, from strategy to actually kind of how you really bring your product to market. So the main overall kind of types of sales or go-to-market models, and there's a lot of kind of permutations of these, but there's really kind of three core ones. And one is more product-led or marketing-led sales. And this is typically what people refer to as low-touch or no-touch sales. So it means you really don't have direct interaction, personal interaction between a salesperson and the customer. So again, here a lot of automation is involved. But I will talk a little bit about what are some of the elements of a product-led sales strategy and why you might choose that versus a direct sales strategy. The other one is direct sales. So this is really, kind of the traditional sales model, especially for B2B, where it's more high touch. You have a salesperson actually, engaging with the customer, usually taking them through sometimes a multi-week or multi-month kind of opportunity, management process, and trying to get them from kind of a, initial conversation through to a demo, through negotiation and to close. And then the other go-to-market model is a channel or partner-led sales. And this can be anything from, retail distribution to, having value-added resellers, OEM, where you embed your solution in another solution. There's all types of, systems integrators, consulting firms. There's all types of partners. So I'll talk a little bit about that. The interesting thing is you don't need to choose just one of these. In some cases, again, depending on kind of the nature of your product and solution, you might employ all of these, or you may employ two of them. So I'll drill a little bit into kind of where these are more appropriate. So as you're thinking about, the go-to-market model that you want to, that you're going to choose, there's really a couple of key elements to think about. So one is your product or solution really conducive to a low touch or high touch sales model? And a couple of examples might be, if you have a very complex product that requires a lot of explanation and hand-holding, it's probably not going to be particularly conducive to a low touch or no touch or automated sales process. On the other hand, if it's a product that people can get an understanding of very quickly, it's relatively kind of simple to kind of explain. People understand the use case, easy to kind of sign up and get on board. Then it might be a great solution for a low touch model. The other thing is pricing and packaging can impact that. So again, one of the, you may want to have a low touch sales model, but your product is priced relatively high. A lot of people aren't going to, for instance, put a $20,000 purchase on a credit card. And oftentimes, as you get into higher price solutions, there's multiple stakeholders involved in making a decision, even if it's simple and you could do it on through an e-commerce model. So pricing can have an impact on the go-to-market model. Now, again, all of these are kind of high level. There are situations certainly where people purchase expensive items online. Carvana, for instance, is a good example. You can go buy a car online. But traditionally, some of higher priced solutions lend themselves a little bit more to a direct sales model. Now, again, lots of disruption going on in the market right at the moment, but something to think about. The other thing, it's worth thinking a little bit about, how do your customers buy? Rochelle talked a little bit about, where are your customers? Where do they kind of live? Where do they spend their time in order to communicate with them? But also there's sometimes specific methods of distribution that customers are used to. And one example I give is if you're in kind of the commercial electronics industry or electrical industry, typically, you buy those products through a distribution network where a lot of the big, electronics manufacturers like, Siemens and others might sell their solutions. So if you decide, hey, I'm going to sell a commercial electrical product, but I want to sell that at Home Depot, you may not really be very well aligned there between where your customers are expecting to find your solution. The other thing is worth looking at where your competitors are, and just generally kind of how your specific industry or market purchases. Now, again, there are a lot of solutions and a lot of examples of companies who have disrupted the traditional go-to-market model. Carvana, I mentioned, is one, where now you can buy a car online, and there's other companies who do that as well. Netflix was another one, how they took kind of entertainment to market from kind of a video rental model, to kind of online streaming. The problem with, if you want to be a disruptor, it's certainly something worth considering. It's typically a fairly expensive proposition, though. You need pretty good, funding behind you if you want to really ultimately, disrupt and turn kind of an existing kind of go-to-market model for an industry upside down to some extent. I talked a little bit about packaging. And so what I mean there is, oftentimes one thing you could do, and this is an example where you could employ multiple go-to-market models, is you may have different levels of solutions, or you might have different features that you sell. You could sell them all together as a single, integrated solution, or you could sell maybe a starter kit and then add on additional features and for incremental dollars. So that's kind of a decision that you can make as well as you think about your go-to-market model. And one thing people do, this concept of land and expand, where you land the customer with maybe a relatively modest price product, and you might be able to do that through a product-led or no-touch sales model. But then as it gets adoption within, especially within an organization, then you may want to have a more of a high-touch sales model where you can get salespeople engaged and try to do kind of a more of an expand deal where now you get your solution being used across the enterprise. So that's also something to think about is do you want to kind of sell everything together as a single solution, or do you want to break it up to some extent, which makes it easier to do land and expand? And then the other thing is about channel and partner models. So again, part of it might be, hey, my solution is typically already sold through a channel. That might be a retail channel or an online channel. It might be through a distribution channel or a series of resellers. So think about how people are currently buying products like yours, but also are there other partners who can help kind of bring your solution to market? So you may have a software solution that works with for instance, a tax solution. You might then go to people who sell accounting solutions and say, well, hey, I've got this tax solution, maybe your resellers can resell my solution, or maybe we can do some kind of integration and go to market together. So there's a lot of examples where partners can help extend your market, and like I say, you can actually have all three of those by using land and expand. Have a low touch model for kind of maybe your initial purchase, a higher touch model for add-on or for enterprise lock-in, and a channel or partner model to kind of help you extend to other regions, other markets, etc. So I'll just kind of drill a little bit into each one of those in a little more detail, and then we'll kind of move on to the actual sales process. So like I said, when I mentioned product and marketing-led sales, typically it's used for lower price products, not always, but that's the most typical situation. And it's usually best for less complex solution. It doesn't require a lot of hand-holding to understand kind of the value proposition or how people would use the product. Typically this is where you're utilizing some kind of an e-commerce platform for transactions. So that could be a Shopify or Stripe or whatever, not necessary, but usually. And there's a lot of focus on kind of marketing or messaging kind of driven micro conversions. So you may, a customer might sign up, but then they haven't, for instance, in the example, for instance, a CRM solution, they haven't yet imported any contacts. So you'd send a message like at every stage of their use of the product to try to get them to convert to the next stage. And so you use a lot of either email marketing or other messages. And by the way, sometimes it can be messaging that's built into the product that gives them reminders, or what's the next step, or hey, congratulations, you've got to this step. Now the next thing you need to do is this. So you want to automate as much of that stuff as you can, but it is really important that you message to them regularly. And like I say, kind of drive them through various levels of conversion, which may not be an actual purchase, but it might be actually just to get them to be using the product successfully. Freemium and trials are typically quite important with product-led sales. And again, oftentimes you might be prompting them to use maybe additional features, or they're using it for some capability. You might prompt them to use other capabilities, again, through that marketing or product-led messaging. And then help them move, to understand how they could use a product in a different way, which may require some kind of an upsell as well. And like I say, the focus is that you essentially have these multiple touch points throughout the customer journey as they're onboarding even their free solution to try to make sure that they're using the product, that they're successful with the product, and that there's then a way that you can upsell them to a paid solution. There is a reasonably good book, I think, that covers the topic called Product-Led Growth by a fellow named Wes Bush. He does have the last third of the book, I think, is the best part, where it really takes you through some specific campaigns where he'll take you through like 10 different emails you might send to get a person from, signing up for a trial to actually be using the product, and how to use that. And I recommend you at least take a look at it, because it's an interesting approach, especially for low touch sales. So the next one, which is more the high touch approach, this is what I say is kind of traditional opportunity management, kind of what you might traditionally think of like what a sales guy is going to be doing. Typically it is, more employed in probably B2B solutions, but also, you can do it in high price solutions in the consumer market, like obviously automotive sales, et cetera. And this is really in that opportunity management approach, there's really kind of 6 different kind of key elements. And this is actually kind of, it can include a little bit of some of the marketing stuff that Rochelle talked about, but really it's preparation, so that, before you even approach a customer. So this is, as Rochelle mentioned, understanding, who is your target, who are the personas, who is it you're trying to reach, et cetera. It's how you approach them. So what's your methodology for approaching them? Is that through webinars or events or marketing or email or direct outreach, cold calls, whatever? There's a whole bunch of different methods you could approach. The next level is qualification. So this is where you actually now are engaged in a conversation with the customer, and it's really about kind of understanding their pains, what their requirements are, et cetera. And then there's a presentation and pitch where you're actually kind of, demoing your product and kind of, presenting your value proposition. And then there's kind of the close, which is not only just asking for the sale, but it's also handling objection and sometimes, doing some negotiation. And then also there's after sales, which in the case of, for instance, SaaS solutions, especially, it's typically now more, as opposed to support, it's customer success. So how do you actually get the products to them, get them using it, and then supporting them kind of through the whole process. And then there's also a lot of follow-up referrals, and that can also include stuff like renewals, for instance, for SaaS solutions. So these are kind of the core. There's a whole bunch of different kind of sales process, training programs, but those kind of 6 stages of a sale are pretty generic. You'll find, there might be some that have 5 and some that have 7, but pretty much that's going to be the same thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 which I think are the most important and which are really more kind of sales focused, which is the qualification, presentation, and close pieces. But before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit again about the channels and partners. So the one thing to be aware of with channels and partners is there's a really wide variety of partnership types and models. So you can do everything from just kind of a referral, where somebody might also sell into a certain customer, and they might just say, hey, I think this customer is looking for something and your solution might fit. You may or may not even pay for that type. So that's kind of a fairly loose partnership. Oftentimes it's not a bad way to initiate a partnership before you kind of get into like a formal contractual arrangement. The reasons why, but again, there's also lots of other ones, right? So you could do white label, OEM, service type partners, retail, value-added resellers. There's almost no end to the type of partnerships you can look at. The advantage is that partners can help you broaden your reach. So oftentimes they may have a very large sales and marketing team or effort. You're, as a startup, you might not have that kind of marketing muscle. So a partner can help you bring a product to a wider market. Oftentimes partners will take on the sales, the marketing and support function. So again, if you're doing kind of a formal, value-added reseller type of model or resell model, they typically will do that. Now, obviously, they're taking some % of the revenues, and those can vary, very dramatically depending on the nature of the partnership, the nature of the solution, and exactly what functions each partner is doing. But that can be a big advantage for a small company that doesn't have a lot of resources, and if you can partner with a big organization that has a large kind of sales and marketing capacity, that can be a big advantage. As I mentioned earlier, you don't need to employ just one or the other. It often makes sense to have, multiple go-to-market strategies. So it's important to think about like what type of partnership will work for you. And like I say, it's not uncommon to start with kind of a fairly low-level partnership, like a referral partnership, and then move into like a co-sell where you're actually selling with them, or to kind of a resell model. So partnerships also kind of evolve, through the various types of partner programs. The key thing to think about is really what's in it for the partner. So it might be interesting for you to say, hey, I'd like to go partner with SAP, right? They've got 50,000, customers, all in, over $100 million in revenue. Boy, that would be a great customer base to reach into. But if there's nothing in it for an SAP, then why would they want to partner with you? So you really need to think about it as you're approaching a partnership is what's in it for the partner. So there has to be an advantage, and that might be that there's some hole in their offering. That might be that it just helps them kind of compete more effectively against their competitors. It might be a revenue opportunity that a partner is looking for, and that whatever % you're giving to them, is definitely something that they're interested in. The other thing, it's important that their salespeople have some incentive as well. So even if the partner themselves have some financial incentives, if the salespeople aren't being comped on it, they're typically not going to waste their time. So, so again, it is important to think through, and as you talk to partners about, exactly how is this going to work for you? How is it going to work for your salespeople? Because you want to make sure that the salespeople, if they're employing a high touch sales model, that their salespeople are also focused on, on your solution as well as their own. The one thing I do recommend is that you, where possible, try to avoid exclusive arrangements. And what happens a lot is if you partner with a large organization, you're a startup, and they might, think that you're really bringing something of value to their solution, they're going to look for an exclusive arrangement so that you don't partner with their competitors. I recommend that you try to avoid doing that. Sometimes there's a value in being a standard. And so if you partner with multiple different organizations, that in some ways can add value to your product and also to the organizations you're partnering with. And so you can think of, for instance, like, if Microsoft had only had Windows for IBM and that was it, and no other computer, that would have been an exclusive relationship, but that would probably in the end wouldn't have made Microsoft as valuable even to IBM. Now, there are some ways that you can enter into exclusive arrangements that might be exclusive by region. So maybe say, well, hey, I'll just do North America, but I want to be able to sell into Europe on my own. Or you might be to a certain segment or a certain industry. You might agree to do an exclusive arrangement, or only for maybe a specific period of time that I'll make it exclusive for the first year. After that, I have the right to go sell to your competitors as well. And then the other thing is, if you are entering into any kind of exclusive arrangement, I recommend that you have hard performance goals. So because the problem with an exclusive arrangement is there's a potential opportunity cost for you. And if the partner doesn't kind of deliver on what the expectations are, and they've kind of locked you up for a year or in a certain region, then that's really a big opportunity cost. So you really need to be careful with any kind of exclusive arrangement. And one thing to be aware of is I've seen this happen many times. Despite best intentions, partnerships do not always work out, and it's sometimes just because timing, salespeople incentives, things, focuses change, etc. So you have to be careful if it's your only go-to-market model and you're partnering with one partner. It can be risky. So just keep in mind that they're not always. You don't have full control, and so it's it's something you need to be aware of. I'm just going to talk really quickly before I get into the actual sales process about just kind of the sales-related functions. And Rochelle talked a lot about lead generation. So that is, like, when I talk about sales, this is kind of total go-to-market. So lead generation is a big and very important part of kind of the sales process. And as Rochelle said, some people just think more about, I'm just going to hire a sales guy and everything will be good. But if they don't really have a solid lead generation strategy, then your efforts could fall flat. And typically then there's also not only lead generation, but there's lead development. So you might be, hey, I've got these 100 targets and I'm reaching out to them, but now I need somebody to kind of maybe take them to the next level. Just get them to agree, for instance, to a demo or something. And typically you still may need a different level of interaction with them. Some of that can be automated. Some of that might be a little more high touch as well. And then there's really the opportunity management piece, which is really kind of where the salesperson is directly engaged, doing the demos and negotiation, et cetera. And then there's the after sales piece, which I mentioned, which is kind of customer success, adoption, service, and support. And the interesting thing is up until relatively recently, the sales team may have performed all of those roles, including lead development. The sales guy would be doing his cold calls, et cetera. But today, every one of those roles is typically much more specialized. And it's partly because, first of all, typically good salespeople are relatively expensive. You want them focusing most of their time on the opportunity management piece. And you can typically do lead development in either an automated fashion or lead or with kind of lower cost resources So typically now in organizations, oftentimes these are specialized. Now, for startups, again, oftentimes you will have one person doing them all, but then at some point, as your business evolves, et cetera, then you may want to look at kind of breaking those out. And by the way, one thing I also recommend is even if you're employing a low touch sales strategy, I recommend highly that you initially treat it as a high touch sales strategy. So even if you're selling a product for $100 and it's not really profitable to have a direct sales guy or you as a founder talking directly to customers, to sell, $100 product, it's a really good learning process. You can learn a lot about, maybe what are some of the gaps in your strategy or in your solution. So it makes a lot of sense to get kind of directly engaged at a higher level of engagement than you might normally employ early on, so that you can really, because it's part of the customer discovery piece of the journey. So now I'm just going to jump quickly into kind of three categories of the sales process, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the first one is qualification. So I mentioned there's kind of three. So before that, there's kind of the more, research, et cetera, the approach, et cetera. But qualification is really where you're now getting in front of the customer and asking them questions. And in my mind, this is the most important part of the sales process, but it's often the one that is skipped over and missed. So there's a real tendency sometimes for people to just immediately jump into presenting their product and telling them, why it's so good and here's all my features, et cetera, without really understanding from the customer's perspective what their specific pains are. And so I recommend strongly that in either prior to kind of a demo or actually in a sales presentation, that you set time aside to ask questions and listen. And really what you're trying to find out is what are these customers' specific pains? And if necessary, you can use examples of how other customers that maybe have used your product, or other customers in the industry, the types of pains that they that they experience, but you really want to get the customers to identify it. So I always recommend, don't tell them what their pains are, even though you may think you know what they are. Have them identify them, and if possible, have them identify them in financial terms. And the reason being is if they can say, yeah, this is causing me like $50,000 a year in either people, resources, or whatever, losses or waste. Then it's easier for you to then calculate what the return on investment is for you for them to acquire your product. And it is important to understand pains versus gains, and customers can have both. So things, maybe opportunities of how they can maybe grow their business versus an actual specific pain. The difference though is oftentimes a product that is just kind of giving an advantage or an opportunity, it's viewed as a nice to have, whereas typically products that resolve a specific pain is oftentimes thought of as a need to have, and as much as possible you want your product to be considered a need to have. So really this is why people focus so much on customer pains versus just kind of opportunities for gains or growth. The other thing about asking questions is it really helps you personalize your presentation and overcome objections before they come up. And one example I give is for an inventory management solution, you might have, for instance, a software that would help people, decrease their days on hand, and also might help with things like, theft and shrinkage. You may, focus your presentation on both of those. But one company might say, well, shrinkage isn't an issue for us, but I really want to reduce my days on hand. That's critical because we're carrying too much inventory. You might go to another company, it might be the exact opposite story. So if you spend a lot of time talking about a feature that's not really relevant to them or as relevant, you can waste a lot of time and sometimes kind of sell yourself out of a deal. So really important to, as much as possible, understand what their specific pains are and personalize your presentation. So on the presentation piece, as I said earlier, what happens is oftentimes people are more comfortable with with this. They're more comfortable in demoing their product because they know their product well. And so they default to that, and as opposed to spending the time asking those questions. Again, really important. I recommend that if you have a sales deck, like an actual slide deck, if you're doing a sales presentation and demo, and by the way, I recommend that you do have a sales deck, that you actually have a slide that says, about you or something like that. So you've literally put it right in the slide deck, you've put it in the agenda, you shared that with them so they know that you're going to be spending some time, asking them questions. And it's a good reminder for you to make sure that that's something that you spend that time on. It's also good in a presentation if you've done even some earlier customer qualification, but now you've got new people, in your presentation, you've got a boardroom, with 4 or 5 people, and you've only done that customer validation with one person. It's good to recap what you've learned, and again, ask those questions of the other players. Hey, is there anything else, that's a key, concern for you? Again, in your presentation, you want to focus on benefits, not features. So really, how is it going to kind of change their life to some extent? Again, you want to customize it as much as possible on that specific customer's kind of pains. As I mentioned, I've seen it happen where people kind of present themselves out of a deal because they focus on pains that are not relevant to the specific customer. The other thing that's really important is that you kind of show them an ROI, that you can show them, and this is again why you ask questions in financial terms, why you want to understand what their pain is actually costing them, because you want to then be able to demonstrate how your solution will provide a return on any investment they make. And again, one thing that comes up a lot is competition. Fine to compare yourself to competition, but don't slam them. You want to make sure that you position yourselves as equal and then better. And then the other thing about being in a presentation and especially asking a lot of questions is it gives you an opportunity to identify who the potential kind of coaches or the people who are advocates for your solution and who might be a detractor as well. And on the close side, just a couple of things. So one is, the one thing that a lot of people forget to do in the sales process is actually ask for the sale. They will, do their customer qualification, they'll do their demo, they'll show all the great features, they'll talk about the value proposition, and then that'll be it. They don't actually, ask for the sale. They just kind of wait for the customer to kind of get back to them. I recommend strongly that you ask for the sale in some kind of a way, like ask them, hey, have we shown how our solution can help, kind of resolve the problems that you're currently experiencing? And have we demonstrated a return on the investment for our solution? And if they say yes, then the next question is, okay, great, but what do we do now? What's the next steps to move things forward? And if they say no, then that means there's probably an objection or something you haven't covered. And so again, a no is actually not a bad thing. It's typically, just raises the fact that there's some objection that either has been, that you've missed or that has been unspoken. So best as much as possible, again, is to anticipate, objections in advance or make sure you ask those kind of questions which might lead to certain objections. So for instance, I always talk about things like integration. So if an objection might be at the end, hey, you don't integrate with this particular ERP system, you want to find out early on if that's going to be an objection. So you want to ask, what integrations are important to them in the qualification stage, rather than kind of waiting, until that coming up as an objection after you've kind of gone through the whole sales process. And be aware that the default decision is usually to defer. People usually don't make a decision right up front. But again, if you can ask questions more in the context of, hey, have we shown how our solution can address, the areas that you identified as being, the problems that you're looking to address, then oftentimes you can get people to kind of commit to move forward. This comment about bad news early versus bad news late is a little bit related to that comment I made about the the integration story. So you want to find out if there is some kind of deal killer type of objection, you want to find out about that, right up front in your qualification, as opposed to finding out about that after a 3 or 6 month, sales cycle. So again, another reason why qualification is really important. And every time you go through a sales cycle, if an objection comes up, then you should think about the next time I do that presentation, what's the question I can ask that would uncover whether that's an objection with this next customer. By the way, one hidden or unstated objection that you might come across is just the fact that you're a startup. So that sometimes people won't come up and won't come straight out and say that. Just say, hey, I'm concerned about you because you're a small organization, that you don't have the resources. That is something that may be a hidden objection that you have to overcome. And one way to do that is to again, talk about maybe existing customers that you've already worked with, talk about your expertise in the industry, et cetera. So there are ways that you can overcome those kind of objections, but just be aware that that might be kind of a hidden objection. And if you get into a situation where you're in negotiating and people are asking about discounts, then the best way is to kind of stress the value that you're delivering and the return on investment. So if somebody's asking for a discount, it's really more, hey, we're already delivering value. We believe you're going to get a return on investment in 6 months or in a year. What doesn't it make sense to move forward? The other thing is that I do recommend is if you are in a situation where you are offering a discount, and certainly that's common. So I'm not saying you can get away with never offering a discount or promotional pricing. Always employ what I call a give to get, which means if you're going to give them a discount, whatever, 10%, you're going to agree to that, then I would ask for something in return. So that might be, hey, yeah, we'll give you this discount. First of all, get a commitment to a time frame, how long that discount's available for. So I'll give you this discount if you're prepared to sign, by May 31st. I'd also, would ask, like in return, that you would give us, for instance, that you would agree to a case study or be a referral customer, presuming, your adoption is successful. So it's always a good time when you're giving something is to ask for something in return. So just a couple of quick extra tips, and then we'll open it up. Like I said earlier, always employ a high-touch kind of process in very early stages of a new solution, or if you're reaching a new market, where you might normally do kind of a lower touch or a no touch or an automated process. Still good to get that direct interaction with the customer to really understand kind of where their heads are at, what they think about your product. Maybe there's some competitors out there that you haven't thought about. So it always makes sense to invest a little extra time and effort in early stages. As much as possible, especially in B2B, try to understand if there's some kind of overarching, customer vision, vision, mission, values, priorities. Big public companies, they'll often talk about that stuff on their website, or certainly if you're a public company, in their letter to the shareholders, they'll talk about what their core priorities are. And so oftentimes it might be, revenue growth, or it might be cost reduction, for instance. So you can, position your presentation kind of to align with what their kind of core priorities are. Really important to understand if there are any compelling events. So this might be a time-based kind of event that's taking place. So that could be anything like, hey, we need to close this before our fiscal year budget next year. It might be, hey, we have a big event that we want to get. We want to make sure we have something in place before that. So again, this is part of the qualifying, is just understanding, are there any kind of time-based compelling events that will either drive the customer to make a decision or might cause a delay in his decision. The other thing, when you're providing pricing, especially promotional pricing, I mentioned earlier, if you're offering a discount, make that specifically time bound. Hey, I'm giving you this discount. You have 2 weeks to agree, or it might be less. Literally, you could do it, say, you have 48 hours, if you want that. I can only hold up to that long. But I actually recommend providing any kind of pricing, unless you have pricing that's published on your website. So if you're doing an actual, just a quote, that you actually make it time bound. So you might say, hey, here's my quote, and it's based on, it's good for the next 30 days. If anything, it helps you kind of drive a discussion around that. If the customer says, well, hey, 30 days isn't good enough, then you can ask them, well, okay, what is your decision-making process? What is your timeline for making a decision? And then you can kind of, it's actually not a bad discussion to have to get into the, what are the elements that need to happen between now and then. And so I can extend that. But again, I would still put a specific date. I wouldn't make it open-ended, but you can kind of extend that, but get some commitment on what that process is. And this is what I meant when I say sequence of events. If, for instance, it's got to go say, well, this has got to go to our legal team, and it's got to go to the IT team, and it needs to go to the audit committee, or something like that, then get a commitment and say, okay, great. Like, who are the people we need to talk to? Let's set up a specific date. We'll make sure we have the resources available. So actually get some agreement to like when those things are going to happen, and get some commitments. It also gives you a reason to follow up if certain things aren't happening. One thing is, if you are being asked to do a pilot or POC, which is certainly very common, especially with higher value products, make sure you're really clear on what the proof points are, so that when the POC is completed, you know whether it succeeded or not. Sometimes it's too open. So I think the term Rochelle always uses is make sure everyone is in agreement on what success looks like when that's over. And again, if customers same with an extended trial or something, or an extended POC, you might say, okay, well, we'll do that, but here's what I want in return, right? We'll do that if you agree to do a case study or whatever. And again, make sure you're getting an agreement to a sequence of events. One thing that we talked a lot about ROI. So, there's a lot of ROI calculators that are out there. You can just search ROI calculator even on a website, and you'll find lots of examples. It's actually a good way to kind of demonstrate ROI for people to kind of fool around with, hey, if I have so many employees doing this function and I can save 20%, how much is that going to save for me? We didn't get it all really into the analytical piece of it. Analytics is very important in both your marketing and sales. And so this is reasons why you want to employ probably a CRM system as your business evolves, because it allows you to use kind of a lot of analytics to really understand, what are some of those ratios, what's your closing ratio, what's your average deal size, et cetera. And then it can help you identify gaps that you can address. And one thing I do recommend is on both wins and losses, that you really go back and spend a bit of time. It doesn't have to be more than an hour, but really say, hey, what led to this win? Was there some really kind of compelling thing that helped us get that over the line? And if so, then how can I replicate that in other deals? And if there's a loss, was there an objection that we could have at least found out earlier, so that we could have not gone through a 3-month sales cycle? Or is there some gap in the product or other things? Is there things that we could do differently next time, to address that? So with that, I think I'm done here, and maybe we can open it up for a Q&A. If anybody has any questions, or happy, whether it's on the marketing side or on the sales side, happy to chat about that.
Yeah, Peter, there was a couple of questions here that I thought would be great for you to probably tackle.
Sure.
The first one, Ali asked, if the customer's employee, so I'm guessing sort of the audience, was lazy and not answering and not cooperating in a sales presentation, how can we handle that situation? So you basically have a disengaged, I'm guessing, Ali, I'm interpreting here that.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that you're talking about the customer in the kind of that customer discovery, customer qualification. Yeah, I mean, that can be tough. I think, it's sometimes just asking the same question in a different way. But this is where it's kind of important to understand. And, and one thing it's good, I think, to when you first meet people, understand what their role is, or what are their objectives, what are they trying to achieve for their company? And oftentimes you can kind of get a little more engagement, asking them more about, what it is that they do. And oftentimes it might be talking to different people as well. And the one thing is, certainly in B2B type deals, there's often multiple stakeholders. And oftentimes some of them are detractors. So the guy you're talking to might not really be the right guy. What you need to do oftentimes is to find, who is the guy who could be my coach, who could be the advocate. So maybe if it's not the guy you're dealing with, you need to also talk to other people within the organization. And again, do your research. A lot of information is available publicly, so you can kind of get a sense of what some of those issues might be, in advance. And then what you're doing is more trying to confirm them as opposed to just asking them. Yeah, and so one other thing I would add is give them examples of, like, if somebody's saying, I can't really think of anything, it's a real big problem. Well, first of all, if there is no pain, that you should know that up front, because it means you're probably not going to get a deal. Or it could just be that they're hard at, having difficulty kind of like really putting their finger on the problem or articulating it. Then it's good to give examples of, well, here's another customer we worked with kind of in this industry. Here's the issue they had. Do you guys have that kind of issue? So that might be another way, is to give them some examples.
And then there was another question from, is it Denny? I'm not sure if it's Denny or Dennis, but basically asking about something around compensation and bonuses, compensating your sales team. I did give him the link to your hiring your sales force, Peter. I said that you might want to review that, but I don't know if you want to briefly mention anything at this point.
Sure. I'll mention it at a high level. So I'm a big believer personally in kind of performance-based compensation, and I believe that everyone in that chain, every one of those roles I mentioned, or like the lead generation, lead development, sales, after sales, customer success, they should all be on some kind of performance-based system, I believe, or incentive-based compensation. Now, depending on the role, it might be quite a bit different percentage. So you might have a customer success person or a marketing person who's driving leads. Maybe 10% of their compensation would be a variable amount where they could either make extra money or they make less if they don't reach their performance objectives. And by the way, I always recommend that you have either accelerators or certainly allow them to make more money if they achieve their objectives. Whereas sales, it might be quite a bit higher. Maybe it could be 30, 40, or 50%, or even more of their compensation could be performance-based. So definitely, I believe it makes sense to do that. With each role, you need to decide, what is that metric. So, in some cases, it shouldn't always be sales. It might be customer success. It might be, what's the churn ratio. It might be how many customers are referenceable. And it's not uncommon to have, for salespeople, multiple kind of performance metrics. And typically, I think it makes sense to have most of it focused on revenue generation, but having some focus on customer success, et cetera, references, that type of thing, so that the sales guys aren't really pushing people who the solution might not even be appropriate for. So something to consider.
Great, thank you, Peter. Paul, you were asking around ROI. So you're saying, can ROI of time saved or efficiencies gained be as effective as dollars to dollars ROIs? And here, really, what both Peter and I have experienced with, especially on the enterprise side, is often it's great then to have an ROI calculator, an Excel spreadsheet, where you kind of ask your customers, how much do you spend doing this? How much does this cost you? And you come up with, you kind of walk them through a calculation, and you say, okay, so if you're spending 10 hours doing this, and on average you spend, you're paying that person $50,000 a year, you kind of come up with an hourly rate for that person. And then you say, okay, now if I could reduce that time from 40 hours a week to 5, that right there ends up being roughly this amount. And so you kind of walk them through the ROI calculation. We find that works really well to get their sort of assumptions and get them to give you a general number. So you can actually put a dollar figure on time saved, as well as efficiencies, because efficiencies also means usually an increase in productivity. So increases in productivity and efficiencies sometimes can have, depending on how we're working with one client that's in manufacturing, that's a real bottom line. Like if basically things are more efficient, there's more throughput, you can actually translate that into a actual number. So that's something to keep in mind, that yes, and usually that's a conversation where you walk them through, ask them for how they structure their business generally, and then use their numbers to highlight what kind of savings that could be around that. And then I guess following up on that, there was a Zoom user asking about the 3,000% ROI. And again, there is one webinar we have around pricing and numbers specifically, but you generally want to go with the highest number. So if it's, if you can show that they're going to generate 240,000 more in profit, that would be the number you want to highlight, because that's more impressive than just a $3,000 or 3,000% ROI. So using the numbers, you will do that. But there is a webinar we have which talks a lot about when to show which numbers to, and the psychology behind numbers when presenting those to your customers as well.
Yeah, and the one comment I would say is that, if you're using a 3,000% ROI number, a lot of people are going to find that hard to believe, I believe. But now, not to say that there aren't solutions that can deliver that. I would make sure you have like a very solid customer case study that actually shows, yes, I deployed this solution. Here's what the result was, and here's, we've got 3,000%, and that you can attribute that gain specifically to your solution, not just, hey, the company, grew their sales by 300%, last year. That might not all be attributable to your specific solution. But yeah, I mean, if you can show that, fantastic. Then I'd say, like, people will be knocking down your door.
And then there was one question earlier on around content. I believe that was Zach. You asked the question around content. Best practices for messaging and content on increasing conversion percentages. I did give you a link to a whole hour webinar on content marketing. But one thing that is probably, I can share it maybe just very quickly, briefly, if I can find it here, that you might want to think about is just sort of a content marketing strategy. And here's sort of a table that I often use that can give you a really good sense of your content strategy. And you can take a screenshot. That might be the quickest way to get that information. But answering these questions will give you a better sense of your content strategy. And one of the challenges I find with content is a lot of organizations focus so much on their product, but don't really think about what kind of content, what kind of messages does your target audience want to hear, and how can you provide value to them. So this is not about you just pushing your product or your service and saying how wonderful you are, but actually highlighting the value that it will provide to your audience. So I find that, again, really understanding the value you're delivering. Is this something they want to hear? Is this really addressing a pain point? Is this really addressing a challenge? Those are all the things around that I find help on the conversion side, where you are really supporting your customers, not just trying to sell them something, in sort of probably the sense that we often think about it. So here are some questions I would ask you around your content strategy that you might want to think about. This is also in that webinar where I go into more detail around each one of these, but I just thought I'd share this with you as something to keep in mind around your content strategy. So let's stop sharing.
All right, thank you. Well, last call for questions. So if anyone wants to put their hand up or put it in the chat, you got about 30 seconds. Oh, there is one more question, actually. It worked. I'll let you field it, Rochelle.
Okay, if the buyer or decision maker is different from the end user, whom should we target? Peter, I'll let you just end with that. That is a common one we field quite a bit.
Sure. So if possible, target them both. And again, as we mentioned earlier, and Rochelle even mentioned in the personas, you can have multiple stakeholders within an organization. You can have an economic buyer, you can have the user buyer, you can have the IT guy, you can have some, risk people who are looking at it. So you need to kind of have a message for each one of them. Now, you may not always get access to the final decision maker. There are some things you can try to get access, but you should make sure that you're helping deliver the message to them. And again, so you need to understand what their pains are a little bit. So again, oftentimes you might be selling, like I say, if you're selling a CRM system, you might be talking to a sales manager and you have all this great stuff about how you can help improve their sales efficiency, but the CFO is the final decision maker and he's looking at it from a dollars and cents and ROI point of view. So oftentimes it's arming your person, again, wherever possible, you want to be able to get in that meeting. So I always recommend if somebody's saying like, hey, I have to present it to my boss, then just say, well, like, how about if I'm there to support you? Because if questions come up, we haven't, I want to make sure you're in a position to, to answer them. So I can just be there. You can do the presentation, but I'll be there to support you if any questions come up. And oftentimes you'll end up doing the presentation to the boss. But if not, it's really understand like, okay, what are the pains? What's their perspective, and making sure you can arm the person who's going to be doing that presentation. Sometimes maybe even creating some slides for them to make sure that they have kind of as many tools as possible to address that.
All right, great. And there is one last question here. I don't know if we have time, but I'll let you read it in the chat there, Peter, while I just do a quick wrap up. So thanks everyone for coming. Next week, we're back to our Wednesdays. Topic is HR 101. If you do want to meet with Rochelle and Peter on a weekly basis and only talk about your company, then please do check out the Sales Accelerator. We have one final Discovery Foundation cohort starting June. So please check that program out if you're in revenue and want to dig deeper. Peter or Rochelle, is there a quick answer to Helen's question, or let me know what you think?
I'm not sure if it's a quick question. It's a little bit more complicated question. It does talk a little bit to that exclusivity thing. But as much as possible, you want to position yourself as a standard, for an industry or for a specific segment. So, so working with another partner just means, hey, we're going to be expanding our footprint, and that's good for you. It's good for the first partner as well.
And I would also build, Helen, to your question, that one of the things that you could put in there are also targets for the first partner and make sure that they're hitting those targets. So part of this is if they're part of your team, making sure that they are performing. So if they aren't performing, it's kind of like, well, then I'm going to have to expand my sales network, right, to get that out. So one way to secure that is to say to them, if you can guarantee me this amount of customers, then we will try to stay with you. So I think that sometimes remember they are an extension of your team. So targets and KPIs, even for resellers, can be an important thing as well to discuss.
All right, great. Well, I think we'll wrap it right there. Peter and Rochelle, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise with everyone. I think it's great to have both the marketing and the sales perspectives all in one topic. So as always, very complimentary, and New Venture is very lucky to have you involved. So thank you again. Thanks to everyone for coming. And we'll put the slide-in video up on our website by tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll see you next Wednesday, and have a great day, everyone. Thanks again. Bye.
Perfect. Okay. Good luck. All the best.
Thank you.